Alpha 4. Hello and welcome to the Ignite Youth Podcast here at Wainfleet VIC Church, where we discuss life through the lens of our Anabaptist roots. My name's Julie Adams. I'm joined by our youth pastor, Pastor Wes Hillis.
Hi.
How's it going, Pastor Wes?
Good. I'm proud of myself. I was calm this time.
We
got through the intro. You looked at me a little bit like, are you
I know.
okay?
I'm like, is everything okay over there?
Yes, I was calm today.
No antics going on?
Nope, nothing.
On your best behavior.
Yes, best behavior. Sure. Yeah. No, things are good. We're back into the swing of things after the junior high retreat. And yeah, it just feels like we're in a really great season of going through a lot with the youth, but also just being able to connect really well. And yeah. Sorry. Phone was not on silent.
I take it back about you being on your best behavior.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. We tried hard.
We tried. Oh, that's great. That's great. If you're newer to the podcast, the youth are going through the Alpha series, which is sort of like a Foundations of Faith. I keep saying that.
Yeah,
you keep
it's
telling
kind of
me
like
it's more than that. So
it is more than that, and so it is foundational in kind of introducing Jesus, but also answering a lot of the questions people may have about faith or prayer or why do we read the Bible? Like,
who's Jesus?
Just a lot more kind of in-depth questions that even if you've grown up in the church, you would kind of be like, actually, I do want to know more. Why do we do certain things the way we do it? Or why in Scripture does it say this, and why do we do it? And so it's a really great learning experience and a way to walk through as a youth who have questions or doubts or have grown up in the church, have a strong faith, and it equips them to actually be able to say, oh, I have that information now if someone asks me, or I can tell people about it. And so it's equipping people, and it's also bringing people into potentially a new relationship or diving into something even deeper. And yeah, it's a really cool series of, this is a fantastic organization trying to just bring Jesus into the world. And it's just really awesome.
Fantastic.
But yeah, and so this past week we what did we do? Faith. We talked about faith. Yes, we always talk about faith, but specifically, how can we actually have faith? Mm-hmm. And what does an actual relationship with Jesus look like? And it's different for every person.
Right.
But one of the ways we actually ask this question of where are you in this journey with God is in the video. It actually showed a picture of a pool. And around the pool, there's people sitting, there's people on their laptop, on their phone. There was a guy walking into the room with flippers and a snorkel on. And also there was people treading water. There was people diving in. There was a guy doing a handstand in the water. There was people all over the place. Yep. And I try to paint it for the best that I can, but we asked students, who are you in the photo? If the pool is this relationship with God, where are you? And we had some people say, I'm the guy dipping my toe in the water. Yep. Or I'm the guy diving right in, or I'm the person kind of sitting off to the side and like kind of outside looking in. And so it was a really cool experience because when you have an image like that, everyone can relate to someone in it. And being able to hear where people are at is really fascinating because it gives you that little bit of insight that you don't usually have. And hearing it from people who have grown up in the church, haven't grown up in the church, it's a really interesting dynamic. And so I remember one of the guys said, like, he grew up in church, but he said, he said, I didn't relate to anyone in the photo, but
interesting.
I would say if there was me in there, I'd be sitting on the side of the pool with my feet in the water. Like my legs kind of like, that position where you're just kind of sitting at the side. And I said, well, what do you mean by that? And he said, well, I've grown up and had like my parents' faith, like this is that. And so I'm kind of there thinking and doubting, but also figuring it out for myself. And I said, so you're kind of getting ready to either get in or kind of maybe step out. And you went, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. And it was really cool because a lot of the guys went, I kind of feel a bit similar to that. And as teenagers who have grown up in church, it's a really big milestone to be like, I'm actually going to make this my own personal faith because
to take
and there's nothing
ownership
wrong
of
with it.
themselves,
Then there's nothing wrong with it being your parents' faith. Like growing up in church and that from a very young age.
Well, and as a parent, we are told to train up your child in the way they should go.
Yeah.
So I think parents are wanting to share something that is important to them and wanting to share something that they believe very deeply in with their children.
Yeah.
So I think that, yes, but I think you're right that at some point it has to
at some point there has to be this transformation of taking it onto yourself. And, and like I said, that looks different for every single person. Because for me, I don't relate to a lot of the guys in this way, but I didn't grow up in the church.
Right.
And so having my own personal faith, that was my own step in understanding. And it was brought to me by the people around, by like my youth leaders or people inviting me to youth group, the youth pastor there. Whereas a lot of the students in our youth group would say, well, I grew up going to church and my parents talked about, we read our Bibles before dinner, or we prayed at dinner, and all these things. It's just a contrast between these two different world experiences. And I would say really looking at it, anybody that's in the category that I kind of came from would say, I wish I had faith from a younger age. Where people in the category of growing up in the church, I find a lot of times say, I wish I had a better story.
Yeah.
And it's it's a really interesting dynamic, because both sides say they wish they had the other's experience.
Yeah.
And I think what's really interesting is at the end of the day, in our small group, when we come together, it's really interesting to share these, because we start to realize, even though you grew up in a church, even though you haven't, you actually have a very similar experience.
Yeah.
When it comes to making faith your own, because whether you've grown up in the church or whether you've not, you still have made mistakes. You are still sinful. You've still done things you shouldn't have. And at the end of the day, we're all on this journey and walk with God. And so really having faith, having this personal relationship, wherever you are in that imagery of the pool, I think an important aspect is that the pool is always open.
Yeah.
And God is not someone who is just like sitting there and being like, well, whenever you're, like, you'll come to me eventually, but he's pursuing us constantly, and he's speaking into our lives. I can remember times in my own life where I look back on it now, before I knew God, I'm like, that was 100% God in those moments. And it's fascinating, because I think I've heard so many people tell me, you will only interact with God once you've entered into a relationship with him. And I tell them, no, you trust me, you will experience God in times where you can't even imagine. And for myself, like, that was a huge part of coming into relationships with God, is actually looking back and seeing, whoa, you've been active in my life for a very long time.
Yeah.
Like, hindsight's 20/20, right?
Absolutely.
And so having faith, having this relationship with God is so key and so important for all of us, because I don't know what my life would ever have looked like if I didn't have this relationship with God. Don't know if I would be here, or just in general, without this relationship with God, because it's so key and it's so important. Like, when I talk to the students, and a lot of them who have grown up in church, who say like, oh, I wish I had their story, I say, but if you only knew that, how hard it is to not have God on your side. Like, maybe I said that wrong, to not have God on your side, but to not know that God is on your side.
Yes, that sounds better. Yeah.
Because you feel like you're fighting every day alone. Like, that's what the honest feeling is that every single day that you go out there, you're on your own. And you have your parents, you have your friends, but at the end of the day, you are alone.
Yeah. And
that's something that's hard. Like, it hurts. And I remember being a teenager, and even from grade 6, being like if you had issues, like, there's no one I could talk to about this, or there's no one I could actually communicate to. And now in my relationship that I have with God, it doesn't matter what it is. I'm turning to God and talking with him. And it's something we really try to tell the students, is that in your personal relationship with God, you can always talk with him. Like, when you have faith, it's this communication, it's this relationship, it's walking with God daily. And I think that's so important. And maybe I push it a bit too much, or a lot, because of my experience with being like, no, trust me, the other side is awful.
Yeah.
Because like, whenever situations happen, I'm talking about this a lot because I think it's a good compare and contrast, is looking at my life previous to knowing God, is when hard things would happen, like fights with friends, or I remember when my grandma passed away when I would have been like 8 or 9. I remember when she passed away, and we talked about heaven and all these things. My family is not religious.
Yeah.
And so there was this idea that I had in my head, oh, she's probably just looking down on us. Like, I think a lot of people have this ideal. And so,
well, it's a nice thing to say to kids too.
Yeah.
If you're not sure, you don't know where your belief is.
But I didn't know how to deal with the emotions or the things or how to deal with that. And it was later on that I kind of said, oh, I'm holding a lot in. Like, I realized how much I was really holding in, and now I needed to actually be able to process and talk this through. But I couldn't because one, I think there's a issue with a lot of young guys is that they're not actually given the space to actually be able to talk about the things that they feel. I don't think girls specifically are in a safe and vulnerable way either. But I had no space to really talk about this, and so I didn't really process or do things. And when I came into relationship with God, and I remember specifically one of my leaders, his name is Tim. He kind of came to me and said, what's in your heart? What do you need to talk to God about? And I was like, what do you mean what I need to talk to God about? He's like, yeah, you know what I mean? Like, you talk to God about what's going on in your life. And I said, yeah, like, you guys pray at small group in that. And I used the word you guys because I was still new in it. And I was like, you guys pray like in a small group. He's like, no. And in my life, I will walk with God every day and I will talk with him. And I said, I never thought of that before, like, or doing that. And I remember trying it. I remember going to high school and talking with God every single moment of the day and coming out of that and being like, that was probably the best day of high school I've had in my whole high school experience. And it's because I was talking to God every single day and talking with him in a way that, when people have made me angry, or when that class didn't go well, or that teacher said that thing I didn't like, or my parents said this or that. And what I realized was, wow, this is a lot easier walking with God rather than on my own. And that's what I want to share, is that no matter where you are in this relationship with God, whether you've grown up in the church, you haven't grown up in the church, your relationship with God is the most important thing. And at the end of the day, we're all in the same boat, that what we really need is to dive into our relationship more, is to talk with God, to learn to walk with him, because it is a learning curve.
Oh, yeah.
And there's times in my life where I don't always feel my relationship with God, but I know the evidence of it through scripture. Like, I can look back on that and be like, okay, God, you were faithful here to these people. I know you're going to be faithful to me as well. And that's something that's so important that we have, is scripture to look back on. And then we take our own life experiences as well, and we look back and say, wow, God, you've been active so many times in my life. I know you're not going to fail me in these moments. And that relationship with God just turns a little more powerful and a little more powerful. And it's like a ball that's ready to snow. Like, it's ready to snowball down a hill. Analogies are great. But yeah. And so in this relationship with God and through the Alpha series that we're doing with youth, I think it's really, really such a tangible thing that we're making practical, is how do you really take the step in the relationship with God? And so for our guys, we challenge them, because in the episode, one of the guys talked about how do I know I'm actually married to my wife? And it's, I could give you a marriage document that says that, we're married, but it's actually living every day and experiencing the love and going through that. And they brought up a point of saying, like, usually at the end of Alpha, they ask people to say, at the beginning of Alpha, did you have a relationship with God? Looking back on it. And a lot of people say, ish, no, maybe so, kind of, but looking back, no. Yeah. And he grabbed the papers and said, now imagine if I said this about my relationship with my wife. Ish, no, kind of so, maybe, but looking back. And it's like, it kind of I feel like made the students kind of think, like, I think that we need to think more of our relationship with God as not some higher up, but rather right here, physical, tangible. It's part of our lives. And I think that's what we're trying to share. And so one of our leaders challenged the guys to be like, really look at your relationship with God. Where do you need to take that next step and go with it? And so that is where we are at right now. We're going to be talking more about prayer and diving into different questions the youth may have. And I hope Alpha can answer those questions, but we'll always be there to help them through it. But it's a really great series so far. And just excited to see where it goes.
Awesome. Thank you, Pastor Wes. If you have any questions or want to talk to Pastor Wes, you can reach him at wes@waynefleetbic.com. I did say
you remember
last week. I did last
You
week.
did?
I did it twice.
Oh, my mistake.
And my email address is julie@waynefleetbic.com. So thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next week. Have a great week.
Bye.